Good morning, friends. I promised a look about for those of you that could not make it to our open farm yesterday. So here we go. So my name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and welcome to my urban farm located here in southeastern Virginia. We're in mid-June, so we are kind of full of flowers right now. And so we're going to start here in our no-till area. I follow a couple of different practices of farming. One is the conventional, which I use my tractor for, and then I have this no-till area that I've been tinkering with for the last couple of years. So this, in fact, was the home to cool flowers this past winter. And as the crops have ended, we've been pulling them out and plugging in warm season tender annuals. That is why you see so many sunflowers in here, and we've left a bunch of them to be great color. There are still some cool flowers in here. This is straw flowers, which we're just all in love with. And then we also have down here, I want to show you especially, this is Atriplex, which is a new cool flower to us. And I want to show this is what we're all waiting for, y'all. It's these lovely seed heads that come after the bloom or the stems look pretty ugly. This is the red plum. I mean, this is just such texture to add to your bouquets. And here it is in green. And it's these seeds that you're waiting for. See how ugly this stem is? That's because it is just developing the seeds. So I wanted you to be able to see that. You can see those are some warm season tender annual new plantings right over there. And there's our eucalyptus, which we haven't cut any of yet this year. And these are two remaining cool flower beds, Scabiosus and feverfew and such. So this is just one of my kind of experimental things that I'm working with. This is our newest habitat area. We have another more well-established one down here. I learned years ago when we found out that we were going to be losing the 40-acre horse pastures and hedgerows next door. I came to really understand that that is where all of the creatures that, helped me to be an organic gardener and farmer lived. So I actually, we knew it was going to all be destroyed. So I hired a native plant landscape designer, and she and I walked over there, the farm, and then she recreated all of that shrubbery and trees that you see there were not there 4 years ago. So she made a plan for us, and each year she adds to it and we add to it as we try to create home base for the birds and the creatures that help our garden, as well as to screen the view. This island is just one piece of that, and to some people this might look like a weedy mess, but I promise you there's turtles and frogs and all kinds of beneficial insects in there that really benefit our farm. And so you can see we kind of keep it neat by mowing the edges. That's the way you let wild areas go in your garden or in your farm or in your yard even. You can't blame your neighbors if you were to put this in your front yard. But if you put it in a spot where you can mow the edges to keep it under control, it makes it super doable. So there's several different native plants that reseed in here, in addition to all the weeds, which are just native plants, y'all, that we don't want. The rudbeckias. So this is a really active spot here. It doesn't get mowed, and it just reseeds. We don't plant anything in here. I might occasionally add, I might put some Joe Pye weed or things that additional native plants. Up here, so many of you may have heard me speak of the Tucker's dog yard. This is an area, it's like 150 feet long, and it goes out to the road, which is nice and shady over there. This is an area that is 100% secure. that I can put Tucker in when I'm working in the garden and don't have to worry about him coming in and stomping flowers. I mean, it's basically like a toddler, right, y'all? It's like you would never just leave your 2-year-old loose on their own. And I find that people tend to do that with their dogs and then wonder why they stomp their garden. So I don't ever go into my garden and work when Tucker is loose. He is loose when I'm out and about like I am right now, where I can manage him. All right, so back here, this is an area, this was an experiment, and those of you that know me know that I am not a fan of landscape fabric, and this has really confirmed it. We decided to make a space back here at the back of the no-till space to house some of the things that we use for the garden, like silage tarps and stakes and weight bags and our hoops, and then this became a brush heap here. But we just continue to have to, every week the edge has to be weed eated, or the weeds will take this. If we did nothing within 1 month of summer here in the South, you wouldn't even see this black cloth. So it's a huge amount of maintenance. It works really well for what we're using it for, like for storage areas, but we have it almost 100% removed from our gardens. There's just a couple of pathways. We have never grown in it, like put it on top of our beds to grow in. We've only used it for pathways, and we're in the process of removing that. So this is the back side of that no-till area. You can see these are cosmos that were just planted. There's the leftover Sweet William. Here is the Limbata Monarda. And you might also be noticing that not much is netted in this garden. It just didn't happen this spring, y'all. We were just crazy busy. And you can see what happens. Look at that Monarda. It is spread. It's not cuttable. It's a pain in the neck. You can't walk through the pathway because there's so many bees on it. So netting, as you will see in our summer garden, is essential to us to preserve stems, to make less work in the long run. And you really can learn how to cut through netting. You just have to learn how to do it. So here is one of the ways we use silage tarps. This is a bed that was sunflowers that had some weeds underneath of it. That's why you see all that bumpy stuff. And so we just pulled the stumps out, and instead of leaving it until we could get to the weeds, we covered it with a silage tarp, and that helps to extinguish the weeds, and it makes it look a lot better than having a bunch of weedy mesh, right? So silage tarps are something that have become to be incredibly useful for us by a lot of uses I didn't realize that you could use them. So this is an old bed of snaps that we left for yesterday for color. This is actually those custom mixes that we make here on our farm called the Dragons. This is the sunset colors. There's pink, yellow, and white. There's up to 13 different varieties and colors and shades in each color group. And so we plant once, and these started in late March, and they've been blooming through, and they should have been pulled out a couple weeks ago, but we've left them for you guys. Here's some status that's pretty wet right now. So that ends our no-till area. And we typically don't use film over there. We can lay film on top of the bed and cover it with 1 to 2 inches of compost and then plant through it. And the Bio 360 is just simply to block the light from getting to the surface of the beds to help with weed suppression. So starting here is our first summer rotation that we did plant super early this year in our effort to get it in. Notice the beds are covered in the black biodegradable film. You're going to see the gray side up a little further down that was just planted. All of these beds are netted, and we pushed the envelope on this planting, and by planting about 2 weeks before our last frost, and hooped and covered every bed and kept them covered and just really kept them happy. And it's really done well. So there's just all kinds of different coxcombs and zinnias and gomphrena and basil and marigolds and celosia plumes and coxcomb hairy balls. Just all of those classics that we typically make our bouquets with. So this particular bed is not netted. This is a bed of zinnia varieties that we just needed imagery for. And so I didn't net it because I really didn't matter to me if the stems got crazy. So there's just a little teeny example of what happens when they're not netted. So, sorry y'all, the sun's coming out. What happens is not only do you lose stems, because these will be 12 to 18 inches taller than this in just a couple of weeks. When a rainstorm comes, it just lays them out. So not only do you lose the stems, you have to waste labor cutting them out of your way. They're a mess in the pathway. I mean, it just creates a whole system you don't even want any part of. Beautiful Gumphrena. Gumphrena is an incredible crop. It is one of the only that we do not net. There's our basil. We do grow vegetables here. So this is our squash, but I did want to show you, here's another use of silage tarps. This is sunflowers that were planted last Monday. The bed was prepared that morning with dry organic fertilizer and tilled. This half was planted. Well, while we wait for the next week for that half up there, we put a silage tarp on it, and that prevents weeds from sprouting and getting ahead of us, y'all. That is just a really useful way to hold weeds back. And this is our tomatoes and peppers. And we do grow more cover crop now than we ever have because we're no longer in that high production years of our business. And in fact, this is buckwheat, which is about 30 days old, and you can't see it, and it's a little wet here already this morning, but it's covered in pollinators. This is at the stage that it's ready to be extinguished. It's when it's in full bloom and the most beautiful, but when you extinguish it, meaning either tarp it, turn it under, mow it, whatever you're going to do with it. It depends on what style of farming you're doing. When you do it at this stage, the cover crop is the most fleshy and it breaks down super quick once you do it. So that is really helpful, and it's not really visible. Let's see if I can let you guys. Do you see how there's areas right up here that are a little shorter and shallower, not as tall and don't look as good as the rest? Cover crop really tells you a story about your soil. We definitely have a drainage problem right here, and this reveals it. So it really helps you to see what you're dealing with. This is also buckwheat that was just planted about 10 days ago, and it's because buckwheat is a warm season tender annual and grows so quickly. That's why it's such a great weed suppressor. If you have a spot in your garden or farm that is not going to be planted for more than a week, I would plant buckwheat because that week turns into 3 weeks, and why not have buckwheat growing there? You can find it at thegardenersworkshop.com. Everybody should have buckwheat on hand and ready to do this anytime you have a blank spot. Super, and in my book, Vegetables Love Flowers, there's a couple of pages talking about cover crop and how even home gardeners that have no equipment can use buckwheat in the summer and crimson clover in the winter and extinguish it without having equipment at your availability. So this is beds that were just planted. This is the Bio 360 with the gray side up. It's too hot now for, if we use the black side up here, all of these seedlings would have probably been dead by the end of the day. They'd have been toasted. The gray side up is about 20 degrees cooler on the surface than the black. And of course, in early spring, we want the black to warm the soil, but this time of the year, soil is plenty warm, right? So this is just a mix of the same things that we just saw down there. This is our second rotation. And these pathways will look just like those pathways, full of vegetation in just a couple of weeks. And we plant nothing, y'all. It just pops up. Those are weeds. Those are our beans, and we grow sweet corn here for our family. It's an old family tradition here. And this is a row of branching sunflowers. Those were grown purely for photography, y'all. We do not grow branching sunflowers for cut flowers. They have soft necks. They drop their petals too prematurely. You can't control the size of the heads. There's a lot of reason. They're awesome in the garden, for a garden, but not as cut flowers. So this is another area of cover crop. This cover crop is only for folks that have equipment. This is sun hemp, S-U-N-N hemp. This is not the hemp that folks are growing for oil and all the other things. This is a summer legume. This stuff will grow 12 feet tall and have a beautiful yellow bloom on it. And we grow it for the tons of organic mass that it creates, as well as the nitrogen that it'll put back in our soil, and also to block our view. So once the corn is gone, this will be tall and help just create habitat. This is another, our more established wildlife habitat. That is purely Triloba rudbeckia, goldenrod, and the invasive non-native tansy, which I do not recommend anybody plant because it really gets out of control. This has not been mowed in probably 5 or 6 years. The only thing we do is dig saplings, and because trees will take you over. And this is home base to our turtles, our frogs, all of those beneficial creatures that just really eat a lot of insects. And birds, y'all, you just can't believe how thick the birds are in here. But we cut tons. The Triloba, which let's walk on this side of it, and we'll see if it is just starting to bloom. And I didn't say much about our native border as we've gone along. It is unedited, and that means that we don't really do anything to it. As you can see, as the plants grow up, they shade out the ground weeds, but we want the ground cover because that's where the ground dwellers live, you know, the turtles and frogs and such. So it's really doing well. So here we are in the pathway. This is the back side of that island we're just looking at. This is a new area that's being developed into a habitat sitting area back here. This is all dog fennel, which is a invasive, as you can see, native weed, and we just have a lot of it. And as you can see, it is quite a bully. So our landscape designer just created a plan for this area, which is this fall's plan to develop this. All of this will be pulled out. We don't really mow back here, but the dog fennel, if you get it right after a rain, you can pull it so you can see what you're working with to not injure any creatures like turtles. So here is the back side of that habitat. This isn't a good representation. Let's see. So the Japanese beetles are also here, and they cause great damage to all these guys. We got a lot of beetle action. See, there's one right there. But the Triloba rudbeckias are these little black-eyed Susans, and they're in a spray. This is our, oh, there's good ones up here, bouquet filler like crazy, y'all. So also, Triloba or any rudbeckia is home base to tons of native bees, y'all. This is why we have so many native bees. So here is one that'll be ready to cut probably by the end of the week, and it's just makes every bouquet happy, y'all. These little teeny flowers. So here's one. Let's pull this down. So all of this would get stripped except for the top 2 or 3 branches, and it like gives you some structure to build your bouquet on. All on that side over there is all goldenrod, and we use all of that for bouquet filler. Actually, like the weeks before it blooms, as it's budded up, but it hasn't opened yet. It's really long lasting and pretty dadgum beautiful. So now we're in our equipment shed, and I'll share with you guys, just like I shared with everybody yesterday. So this is my original tractor. This was my dad's, or actually it was Steve's original tractor from my dad. It's a 1954 Jubilee, and so we could bush hog and plow before I got my other tractor, but I had him put the subsoiler on because so many people aren't familiar with this. A subsoiler does not mix the soil. That blade is super heavy and literally drops down into the garden a couple of feet or more and just makes crevices so that water, and you open the drainage up, it busts hard pan. And we try to do that every couple of years especially in those areas that are really having drainage issues. But then when we were able to have more land here, we bought the 1.5 acres adjoining our property. That's when we bought our John Deere. And this, by the way, is the 8-horse Troy that I started with. Still use it occasionally, but this is what I used for the first 10 or 12 years up until I got the John Deere. So we bought the John Deere when we got this additional land because there was just no way we could continue to make beds and turn beds by hand. And I will tell you that adding this piece of equipment and a tiller and the bed maker, which we'll look at next, truly quadrupled our business. We were able to get twice as much out of every bed instantly, just about. And that's what really grew our business. So around here is Roxanne, the bed layer. And this is called a mini layer. And so the tractor hooks onto the front of this and goes that way. There's no moving parts. It's by pulling it that the bed layer gathers the soil, forms the bed, lays the irrigation tape, and the film would be laying back here. It does everything at once, y'all. That means that in 30 seconds, a 100-foot bed is made, formed, irrigation laid, film on it, and sides tucked. And there's videos on our website of you being able to see how this works in action and in flower farming school. But Roxanne just revolutionized our life. It allowed us to suppress weeds, make beds, and it does the manpower of 5 people. But in addition to that, so this bed layer, even it's made by Amish in Pennsylvania. They shipped it down to me on a crate. The shipping and this implement, when I bought it about 9 years ago, I don't even remember, was $3,000. That's less than the labor of one person for one spring. So totally best investment we ever made. And here we are years later, still making beds with this baby, right? So let's walk back here to one of our original gardens. And our old property line actually used to be right here through these trees. So all of this we were able to purchase about 8 years ago. That's when the tractor happened, the bed layer. I mean, we knew that we could not any longer do everything by hand when we got more land for the type of farming we were doing. So this is one of our original gardens. We have more corn. Silage tarp is down on cover crop that it's extinguishing. Actually, we grew sun hemp here last year, mowed it, planted winter rye on top of it for the winter, and then just mowed it. And now that's what's underneath there. And I don't know what we're going to plant there next. I'm just going to have to wait and see what the summer does. But we have another row of branching sunflowers for pictures. And we'll just walk through here to get back to the hydrangea grove. So this is our Lizzie-anthus bed, which actually right here, these are zinnias. We'll get to the Lizzie here in just a second. So some reseeded bupleurum, which we always leave because we need it. These are our Roseanne greens, and they are gorgeous. And they have been through now 3 rains, and they do not look blemished. So those are going to be keeper varieties. This is actually garlic that's in my way here. These are our tuberoses with tons of reseeding celosias in here, which we allow because we'll use them. And here's more Lizzie-anthus. You can see the cover crop over there. We pulled that back to make better walking for the tour yesterday. And here is some feverfew. This is the Tetra White. This is Virgo. And then down here is the Sunny Vegmo Yellow, I think that is. And back here is our Hydrangea Grove. And so people ask me about what do I do about mosquitoes with the water on the tarp. I use the BT bits They're the mosquito dunks. They make bits, and you can sprinkle in there, and it is safe. And that way, any larva that eats it dies. And so that's what we do. So this is our hydrangea grove, which isn't really impressive right now. We have cut the heck out of it. It's back here in the perfect location. It gets morning sun and afternoon shade. And this is super amazing bouquet fillers. And these were all cast off plants that Steve brought home in his job, where they're putting in sewer and water lines and people just don't want them. And he brings them home, and literally that's what all of these plants came from. We do nothing for them. We don't fertilize them, water them, mulch them. They just are happy back here. The deer occasionally eat them. And now let's walk up here. And there's the inn, the little cottage that was one of the buildings here on the farm. This was Steve's grandparents' homestead. And they were the second. Menno Bronk built our house, and Steve's grandparents moved in. This little cottage, which I used for a garden shed, was actually a cottage to people. I mean, how sweet is that, right? This is our peony patch, which Dave was at yesterday talking all about. These were my grandmother's and Steve's cousin's mother's. We got 2,000 stems of peonies off this patch. Pretty daggone amazing. So there's a bed of sunflowers, actually 3 different plantings. And here, let's walk around and look at the front of this inn. Bobo made a beautiful wreath for here. That is poppy pods and sunflower heads and statice and grapes, and just really beautiful, right? This is Heliopsis, the perennial sunflower. That's the double. I think it's called hybrid something. I can't remember. And that's the single. So back here is our shade garden where all the Lenten roses are. This is a 35-year-old, actually 25 years here. The original 3 to 5 plants that were brought from my garden, my previous home, populated all of this. This is Hellebores orientalis and Hellebores niger. This is a saucer magnolia that Steve's grandparents planted in the 60s, we think. And this is just a super sweet place to sit, y'all. It's really cool. And these Lenten roses are a huge cash crop. We use the foliage in bouquets after we've used, as well as the blooms. And these guys will reseed if you plant the varieties that are not sterile, as many of the new hybrids are. So this is the shade garden. And this is the well that you can see in, you won't be able to see this now very well, but in Vegetables Love Flowers, there's a great image of this with the xenia pinwheel on top of it. Menno Bronk, who built this house, his children brought him back here. Gosh, it must have been 20 years ago. He was like 92 or 93. He hardly remembered his children's names, but he remembered everything about building our house. One such story was that the steps that were on the front of our house, which were concrete, which are now on the inn building that we just looked at, he told the story of how they were mixing the concrete. You know, this was a long time ago, y'all. It was mid-30s. That he made that lid for the well. That well is, I call it a cowboy well. Those bricks that are the round circle bricks are like 30 or 40 feet down. I mean, it's the most amazing sight to see. Anyway, he said that, you know, he made a lid because they had extra concrete, but he just couldn't remember what to put on the top of it to write. And it came to him that evening, and he came out and wrote on that lid John 4:13, which says, "Whoever drinketh of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinketh of the water that I shall give you, you will never thirst again." And those are the words of Jesus. And anyway, that was just super special that's what his kids brought him back to see. That's what he really wanted. They wanted to know if it was still here. They remembered it from their childhood. I mean, 2 of his kids were born in the front room of our house. So it was really, really super sweet. So I'll walk over here, gang. This is really it was a great tour day here. So there's the big garden. There's my workshop. Stevie's workshop is back there. So we're just really pleased. We had a huge turnout yesterday. We were so happy to welcome so many. And we hope to see you next time, maybe. So till we meet again, friends. Ciao.